William Bradford, first governor of the Plymouth colony for over 30 years and was a signatory to the Mayflower Compact. He kept a journal of the Pilgrims' first years in America, titled Of Plymouth Plantation.
Being thus put to sea, they had not gone far, but Mr. Reynolds, the master of the lesser ship, Speedwell, complained that he found his ship so leaky as he did not dare put further to sea until she was mended. So the master of the bigger ship, Mayflower, being consulted with, they both resolved to put into Dartmouth and have her there searched and mended, which accordingly was done, to their great charge and loss of time and fair wind. She was here thoroughly searched from stem to stern, some leaks were found and mended, and now it was thought by the workmen and all, that she was sufficient, and they might proceed without either fear or danger. So with good hopes from here, they put to sea again, thinking they should go comfortably on, not looking for any more problems of this kind. But it turned out otherwise, for after they were gone to sea again about 100 leagues without the land's end, holding company together all this while, the master of the small ship complained his ship was so leaky as he must bear up or sink at sea, for they could hardly keep her free with much pumping. So they came to consultation again, and resolved both ships to bear up back again and put into Plymouth, which accordingly was done. But no major leak could be found, but it was judged to be the general weakness of the ship, and that she would not prove sufficient for the voyage. Upon which it was decided to dismiss her and part of the company, and proceed with the other ship. The which, though it was grievous, and caused great discouragement, was put in action. So after they had taken out such provisions as the other ship could well store, and concluded both what number and what persons to send back for London, and the other was to proceed on her voyage. Those that went back were for the most part such as were willing so to do, either out of some discontent, or fear they felt of the ill success of the voyage, seeing so many problems befall, and the year time so far spent, but others, because of their own weakness, and having many young children, were thought least useful, and most unfit to bear the brunt of this hard adventure, unto which work of God and judgment of their brethren, they were contented to submit. And thus, like Gideon's army, this small number was divided, as if the Lord by this work of his providence thought these few too many for the great work he had to do. September 6th. These troubles being resolved, and now all being together in one ship, they put to sea again with a good wind, which continued many days together, which was some encouragement to them, yet as usual many were sick with seasickness. And I may not omit here a special work of God's providence. There was a proud and very rude young man, one of the seamen, of a strong, able body, which made him more arrogant. He would always be condemning the poor people in their sickness, and cursing them daily with grievous curses, and did not hesitate to tell them, that he hoped to help cast half of them overboard before they came to their journey's end, and to celebrate with what they had, and if he were gently corrected, he would curse and swear most bitterly. But it pleased God before they came halfway across, to strike this young man with a serious disease, of which he died in a desperate manner, and so was himself the first that was thrown overboard. Thus his curses came upon his own head, and it was a shock to all his fellows, for they noted it to be the just hand of God upon him. After they had enjoyed fair winds and weather for a time, they were met many times with cross winds, and encountered many fierce storms, with which the ship was badly shaken, and her upper works made very leaky, and one of the main beams in the middle was bent and cracked, which put them in some fear that the ship could not be able to complete the voyage. So some of the leaders of the company, realizing the sailors feared the ship was not adequate, as appeared by their grumbling, they entered into serious discussion with the master and other officers of the ship, to consider the danger in time, and rather to return than to throw themselves into a hopeless and certain peril. And truly there was great conflict and difference of opinion among the sailors themselves. They wished to do what could be done for the sake of their wages, being now halfway across the seas, and on the other hand they were reluctant to risk their lives too desperately. But in examining all opinions, The master and others stated they knew the ship to be strong and firm underwater, and for the buckling of the main beam, there was a large iron screw the passengers brought out of Holland, which would raise the beam into its place, which being done, the carpenter and master stated that with a post placed under it, set firm in the lower deck, and otherwise reinforced, he would make it adequate. And as for the decks and upper works, they would caulk them as well as they could, and though with the motion of the ship they would not long remain watertight, yet there would not otherwise be too much danger, if they did not overstress her with sails. So they entrusted themselves to the will of God, and decided to proceed. In several of these storms the winds were so fierce, and the seas so high, as they could not hold any sails, but were forced to drift, for many days together. And in one of them, as they thus drifted in a mighty storm, a strong young man, called John Howland, coming above the deck for some reason, was, with a roll of the ship thrown into the sea, but it pleased God that he caught hold of the topsail ropes, which hung overboard, and ran out their full length, yet he held his grip, though he was several fathoms under water, until he was hauled up by the same rope to the edge of the water, and then with a boat hook and other means got into the ship again, and his life saved, and though he was somewhat ill from it, yet he lived many years after, and became a useful member both in church and community. In all this voyage there died but one of the passengers, which was William Buckten, a youth, servant to Samuel Fuller, when they drew near the coast. But to omit other things, that I may be brief, after long beating at sea they encountered that land which is called Cape Cod, which being identified and certainly known to be it, they were not a little joyful. After some discussion had among themselves and with the master of the ship, they turned about and resolved to head southward, the wind and weather being fair, to find some place around Hudson River for their settlement. But after they had sailed that course about half a day, they encountered dangerous shoals and crashing breakers, and they were so tangled with them as they thought themselves in great danger, and the wind dying down on them as well, they resolved to turn back for the Cape, and considered themselves fortunate to escape those dangers before night overtook them, as by God's providence they did. And the next day they entered the Cape Harbor, where they anchored in safety. A word or two about this cape. It was first named by Captain Gosnold and his company, in 1602, and later by Captain Smith was called Cape James, but it retains the former name among seamen. Also that point which first revealed these dangerous shoals to them, they called Point Care, and Tucker's Terror, but the French and Dutch to this day call it Malabar, because of those dangerous shoals, and the losses they have suffered there. Having thus arrived in a good harbor and brought safe to land, they fell upon their knees and blessed the God of heaven, who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean, and delivered them from all its perils and troubles, again to set their feet on the firm and stable earth, their proper home. And no wonder if they were thus joyful, seeing wise Seneca was so moved by sailing a few miles on the coast of his own Italy, as he stated, that he would rather stay 20 years on his journey by land, than pass by sea to any place in a short time, so difficult and dreadful was the same to him.
William Bradford. As one of the leading pilgrims who journeyed to the New World aboard the Mayflower in 1620, William Bradford was instrumental in the establishment and governance of the Plymouth colony. After escaping religious persecution in England, Bradford and his fellow separatists negotiated the Mayflower Compact to establish rules for self-governance in their new home. Bradford went on to serve as the Plymouth colony's governor for 3 decades, overseeing the colony's struggles, growth and development into a stable settlement. He led the colonists in establishing positive relations with the native Wampanoag tribe through a peace treaty with Chief Massasoit. Bradford kept a detailed journal of Plymouth plantation, documenting the Pilgrims' voyage on the Mayflower and their first years living in the Americas. This provides crucial historical insight into early colonial life. Overall, William Bradford was one of the most influential Puritan leaders, whose governance and writings shed light on the Pilgrims' journey and establishment of the Plymouth colony.